That's okay.
Hi, and welcome to Spiritual Alchemy Energy, the podcast with Julie. Today, I am honored to have Dr. Alan Lycka with us. I'm going to do a little introduction, which is going to wind me. He is a thought leader, mentor, transformational coach, TEDx, and international keynote speaker, has been acknowledged globally as a leading cosmetic dermatologist, as well as a pioneer in cosmetic surgery. He has hosted the #1 internet radio show in the world on cosmetic surgery and currently hosts the podcast, How to Live a Fantastic Life. He is a 3-time best-selling author who has co-authored Blue Talks Presents Business, Life, and the Universe with Corey Poirier. He has also co-authored The Pillars of Success with Jack Canfield, as well as had a foreword written by Jack Canfield for the book we're going to talk about today, that he co-authored with a woman of distinction and former New York fashion model, Harriet, The Secrets to Living a Fantastic Life.
Yay. Yay.
This book is a great contribution to humanity. This is a book that I want to run out and get a case of and share it with all my friends and family.
Well, that certainly is a nice thing for you to say. I'm so honored for you to say that, and I'm so honored to be on your show.
Well, thank you. I'm just so honored. This book was really well put together. There's a lot of quotes in it, which I love. So you've made a section in the back of the book to do justice to all of those, as well as spice through the book and lace it to go along with the stories, which are wonderful, and the structure. So this book is about the 13 golden pearls to live your life, basically. And then there's a bonus one.
Yeah, for sure. It's interesting how this book came about, and it's interesting how it got to fruition. And maybe we can start at the beginning with my story there, and that way people will understand it a little bit more. It was 2003, and I was walking in Disneyland, the happiest place on earth, with my wife Lucy and my youngest daughter Stephanie. And we were walking along, and my wife turned to me and she said, "What's wrong with you, hon?" I was taken aback. For once in my life, I hadn't said anything wrong. I hadn't done anything wrong. I hadn't even thunk anything wrong. But my wife persisted. She said, "What's wrong with you?" I said, "Dear, I don't understand what you're talking about. I don't think there's anything wrong with me at all." She said, "Yes, there is. Listen to your foot." I said, "Dear, that's the funniest thing you've ever said. What do you mean, listen to your foot?" She said, "Well, listen to it." Well, my right foot had suddenly, mysteriously developed a right foot drop. It was slapping on the pavement with each step I was taking. Now, your brain is designed to make that not happen. The brain is designed to make your foot step up every time you're taking it. But my foot wasn't doing that. It was literally flapping on the pavement. So my wife said, "Did you have a stroke?" And I said, "Dear, you're a doctor. I'm a doctor. If I had a stroke, I'd probably be muttering something unintelligible or lying on the pavement right now." Well, then she said, Julianne, she said, "Well, when you get back, you better get this checked out." Well, when your wife says something like that, your significant other says something, what do you do, Juliet?
You've got to go get it checked out.
You got it right. Well, so I went to see dozens of doctors, which led to hundreds of doctors. And they did all sorts of tests. They did uh,
Mm,
bone marrow aspirations. They did
mm.
EMGs. They did CAT scans. They did brain scans. They even did scans. And you know what they showed at the end of the day?
Well, I read the book, so
You know, they showed absolutely nothing, nothing.
right.
And so, when a doctor sees absolutely nothing, he does more tests and more tests and more tests because he wants to have an answer to the problem.
Right.
Well, at the end of that, there still was absolutely nothing on the test. So they decided to send me to a neurologist. Now, a neurologist is the brain guy. He's the guy that has all the answers to all the questions. So they sent me to him, and I walked in and I said hi, and he said hi back. But he said, "You better be sitting down when I tell you this." And I
Mhm.
said, "Why? I have got a dropped right foot." He said, "No, you don't. You have Lou Gehrig's disease, ALS. Get your affairs in order. You're going to be dead in 6 months." I was shocked. I was surprised and shocked. What do you say when somebody's giving you a death sentence? So I asked him, "Is there a way to prove this diagnosis?" And he said, "Yes, of course, on autopsy." The guy had no bedside manner. He was
Mm,
educated by Dr. House on that old TV show. He just didn't have any bedside manner whatsoever. But when you go through this, you go through the phases of death and dying that Elizabeth Kubler-Ross wrote in her book. You go through anger, and anger is not a very happy emotion, but the only good thing is it motivates you. I was angry for weeks and months. I could bite the head off nails. I'd bark at everybody. I'd yell at everybody. It just wasn't a happy time. You go through bargaining. You go through, "Oh God, please don't let this happen. I'll do anything if you don't let this happen." But I didn't think God was listening to me, at least not then. You go through denial. And by denial, I don't mean the river in Egypt. I mean, you deny what's going on in your life. So I'd work 10, 12, 24 hours a day. I felt there was nothing wrong. But my right foot didn't work properly, and I persisted having that foot drop. And my right arm and right hand started having problems. So I couldn't hold scalpels and lasers like I used to. And my right hand became more of a problem as well. But I was smart, so I was able to adapt, and I was able to do everything with my left hand. I was able to do surgery completely left-handed. I was one of the few left-handed surgeons that were out there, and it was quite a chore that I was able to do that. But I adapted. And then you go through depression. Julianne, have you ever been depressed? I mean, really clinically depressed?
yes. Yes.
Yeah, it's one of the worst emotions there is. Those are what I call the black days, where everything is black. Life is black. You don't sleep, you don't eat. Life has no meaning. You could stay in bed all day staring at the ceiling.
Mm,
Why? Because it doesn't really matter. You're going to die anyhow.
right.
In fact, I had a plan to end my life because if I was going to die, I wasn't going to die with the terrible things that happen with a person with ALS. I was going to die in such a way that it would have been a better way. And so I before I did that, I went to ask my wife, "Dear, what do I have?" She said, "I haven't got the faintest idea," she said. But she said, "You're smart. You can figure it out." I said, "Dear, I've just seen hundreds of doctors. They couldn't figure it out. Why do you think I can?" She says, "Because you're smarter," she said. "You can
Mm,
figure it out."
mm,
So back in 2003 to 2005, something new was invented. You might have heard about it, Julianne. It's called the internet. You ever hear of that beast?
of course.
Of
That's what
course.
brings us together.
That's why we live and die in this day and age. The internet is there. It's an omnipresent thing right now that literally helps people in their daily lives. And without it, we almost feel like we're lost now. But back then it was very primitive, and you had to get on with dial-on connections. So your phone would attach to a cradle and it would go ria, 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 that obnoxious sound for about 15 minutes before it attached. And then when it attached, what it did was you were able to get in touch with people on the other side. And by a very primitive language, such as DOS, you're able to communicate with people. Now, remember, back then, computers had no memory, so we couldn't use all the things that we do now. There was no Dr. Google, there was no Dr. Yahoo to help us out. We literally had to pick our way across and look for things. Now, I've always found the internet the most amazing thing, but it's like the best library that's full of garbage cans, and you can't tell the garbage cans from the great books that are there. So I was fortunate. I had friends that were nerds, and they were able to find a doctor by the name of Dr. David Martz in Colorado Springs, Colorado. David was a brilliant man who was a hematologist, but he had a disease very similar to mine, but it got worse much more rapidly. And within weeks, he was on his deathbed. So doctors from around the world were coming to say goodbye to David because he was so well known. And a doctor from Texas, a Dr. William Harvey, came up and he looked at David and he said, "David, I don't think you have ALS. I don't think you have Lou Gehrig's disease." David whispered, because that's all he could do at that time. He said, "What do I have?" The doctor from Texas says, "I think you have chronic Lyme's disease. I think you've been bitten by a tick. And I think that has caused a chronic neurological illness that looks just like like ALS." So David says, "Well, what do I do?" The doctor from Texas says, "You need not do anything. I will start you on treatment. And if you respond, then we've got the answer." Well, David said, "Well, what do I have to lose? I'm dying." So he started him on treatment, and a miracle happened. David arose from the dead just like Lazarus, and within a couple of weeks, he was back to his usual self. Now, I knew I had to get in touch with David. So I phoned every hospital in Colorado Springs, Colorado, and I got in touch with David at the Methodist Hospital. And there he was there, and we talked for hours. And he said, "Dr. Lycka, can you come down and see me?" And I said, "When?" He said, "What about right now?" I said, "David, it's our Thanksgiving weekend up in Canada. You know, our weekend's different than yours." And he said, "Well, I'm sure it'll be tough," but he said, "Aren't there any planes in Canada?" He said. He wasn't going to take no for an answer.
Right.
So I went to my wife and I said to my wife, "Dear, I'm not going to be here for Thanksgiving." And she said, "Where are you going this time? You're always away. You're always teaching. You're always educating people. You seem to be gone a lot." And I said, "Well, there's a doctor in Colorado Springs that claims he can help me." Well, my wife said, "What are you waiting for? I'll pack your bag for you. I'll even drive you to the airport," she said. It's interesting how she did a 180-degree turn from that when she knew that there was some hope there. So I flew from Edmonton to Denver. It was a great flight, 2.5 hours long. And then I got on a rinky-dink puddle jumper from Denver to Colorado Springs. Julianne, have you ever been on a rinky-dink puddle jumper? Well, this one had its exceptionally bad times because what happens is the air comes off the desert at the end of the day in that area. And so it causes eddies, which causes turbulence. So a plane will be flying along and all of a sudden it'll drop 100 feet. And then it'll climb back to its air, and then it'll drop 200 feet. So it's like the drop of doom at Disney World over and over and over again until you get to your destination. So when I got at the destination, I crawled off and I was green. And literally, I got off and there was David to meet me on the tarmac. Back then they didn't have all the precautions that they've instituted now. He was a well-known doctor meeting a well-known doctor, so there was no need for those safety precautions we have now. So he drove right onto the tarmac and met me. And we went and met and talked for hours. And David said, Dr. Lycka, I think history is repeating itself. He says, I'm going to start you on treatment. And that's why I'm still alive here and now, doing the things that I could always do. But Julianne, when you go through something like this, you either turn hard and miserable, or you look at this as a blessing. You look at this as a second chance. You look at this as something that God has bestowed on you, as something that you can move forward from and use this to help others. And so I started giving, and I started giving to a charity called the YWCA. And they were sponsoring an event, which I became the main sponsor for, called Women of Distinction. And at that event, a wonderful lady by the name of Harriet applied for an award called the Turning Points Award. Now, the Turning Points Award was being given for a lady that's changed her life 180 degrees. And that really met Harriet completely. You see, Harriet was a world-class model walking the runways of New York and Milan and Paris when she decided to change her life because she didn't like that industry any longer. See, the modeling industry is a dog-eat-dog breakfast, and it's not a very fun thing after the first couple of years. And so she decided to take up her second love, which was accounting. So she went to the University of Calgary in Calgary, Alberta, to take up her second love. And there she was befriended by a person who turned out to be a psychopath. He was very crazy, and he ended up kidnapping her, stabbing her, and leaving her for dead. Now, Harriet doesn't know how she got to the hospital, but when she got there, she was, of course, mended, and she was going through rehab. And she met a young girl by the name of Amber, who was riding down the corridors in a wheelchair. Amber was a very special girl who had lost both of her parents and her use of her legs in a car accident. And she looked at Harriet and asked Harriet for her story. And when she heard Harriet's story, she said, "What are you moping for? You can use your story to help others." So the reason why Harriet had applied for this award was so she could meet me. And she wanted to meet me to write a book with me. And that's where we came up with the idea of writing this book called The Secrets to Living a Fantastic Life. Now, it took many years to get that book together because writing a book is not an easy experience. But we got the book written, and it happened just at the time the pandemic hit. So it became a bestseller, and an international bestseller at that. And it's out there for the world to read and understand, because we want people to get the message on it. See, the message is simple. The message is, it's not what happens to you, it's what you do with what happens. And in our book, we refer to pearls. And pearls are basically an amazing product of nature. You see, what happens when a pearl forms is a little grain of sand gets inside of the shell of an oyster, which causes the oyster to wall it up with this beautiful material called luster. Now, in the South Pacific, there's specific oysters that make golden pearls. Now, a single solitary perfect golden pearl is so rare, it costs upwards of $10,000. So the golden pearls we found in people are ones that are inside of people, and they're even more beautiful than anything you can buy, such as those pearls I referred to. And these are the pearls that we want everybody to concentrate on, in which they build their life around, in which are down inside themselves. All they have to do is look inside themselves and find these. Now, each story in our book, each chapter in our book is unique. It starts with a quotation. And then after that quotation comes a story. And the story is like a parable. It's meant to carry the meaning of that chapter into your life. And after that, there's a lot of quotations, and there's this dialogue Harriet and I had as we were writing this book. So the reader is like a fly on the wall listening to our dialogue as we're writing the book.
Mhm.
So it's a very unique book in the history of books. It's not just a person talking from the mouth, it's a person bringing their unique perspective to it.
Absolutely. I've actually, because I've read your book, I am currently writing a book and I have a lot of dialogue in my book. So,
Cool.
so your book's a little bit of an inspiration to me.
And I
Just a
love
little.
that because most people will say, don't put dialogue in a book. It's not right. And my answer to that is why? People love stories. People love dialogue. People love that aspect of a book. If you don't have dialogue, it's like only one side of the story. This is much better than that.
It's it's fantastic. And I recommend if you wear makeup, not to wear makeup while reading this because you will cry your eyes out. Happy and sad. So,
Well,
uh,
that's the two parts of life. On one side, you have happiness. On the other side, you have sadness. And it's the tears of joy that allows us. But it's also the depths of despair that allows us to understand the heights of exaltation that we have. Without the depths that people go through, we will never understand the joys and exaltations that we are given. So I think people have to be willing to experience the full set of human emotions. That's why we're the people that we are. And this book is about vulnerability and allowing yourself to be vulnerable. And vulnerability allows you to get to another level.
as well as fear, working through fear,
Yes,
right?
fear is our bonus pearl. And fear is a difficult thing because so many people are afraid in this day and age. I mean, we've just come through 2 years of a pandemic where every day we were told the world's going to end tomorrow, and every day, and now we're going through a very terrible war that's going on. And again, those images that keep being blown in our face every day is another thing. But remember, even in the worst times, that very few things that you're afraid of actually happen. Fear stands for false expectations appearing real. And if you realize that 95% of the things that you fear never ever happen, in 4% they happen, but they're much greatly diminished from what they are from what you appear them to be. So just think of that. 99% of the fears that you have are not real. They're like a false apparition.
It's very true. Very true. Some false dialogue we use with ourselves.
And that dialogue that goes on in our head has to really be rewired. And we really have to think about rewiring it in a way that's more positive for ourselves. And that's why I put so many quotations in the book, so you can concentrate on those quotations and allow them to let them reverberate in your brain and allow you to get over the things in your head that are not behaving properly.
Right. right? Or not serving you well.
Yes.
Um, so you live kind of going through some of these pearls, living with intention. You-
Yeah, let me go through some of these. I'm just going to pull up something on my screen here so I refresh my memory. I usually have a copy of my book beside me, but unfortunately, I've just been moving and things are still in boxes. So I
oh,
pull it up on my screen so I can see it properly. So intention is one of my is the second one of my pearls, and I think it's a very important one because intention is something that we have to have every day. We have to live a life with intention. If you don't have intention and goals, you will never live a life to fruition. And it's important to live that life to the fullest in all the ways that you can.
absolutely. I just love this book. It speaks volumes. If someone used this as a plan for their life, they would have definitely a fantastic life. That's for sure.
Well, and that's what I'm hoping it'll do. I'm hoping that it'll inspire people to live that life as much as they possibly can. I'm hoping people will live a life to the greatest that they can, and they should do it using these to help their life be stronger and better. And that's why I'd like people to use our pearls as guideposts as along the way. For example, one of the pearls I use, and it's our first pearl, and that's love. And the quote I use is one that I quote myself at, and it says, I believe that dreaming is stronger than reality. Desire is more potent than apathy. Hopes are more powerful than despair. Joy always triumphs over sorrow. That laughter is the ultimate cure for man's foibles. And I believe that love is stronger than hate, the greatest gift of all. So this is the sort of thing I want people to embody, and I'd love them to be the embodiment of love if they can.
Absolutely. And the story that goes along with that, the shoebox. Oh my gosh. Don't get me started.
I'd read it, but then you'd probably cry as a result of
I
that.
would.
And so anybody that's listening to this, I really would encourage you to listen to pick up a copy of the book and read some of the stories that we have in it. And the stories are really meant to resonate with you. And perhaps I can go through one story, and that's the story of enthusiasm. There was a carpenter by the name of Fred, and he had been working for one company all the days of his life. And at the end of it, he decided he was 65 and he was going to retire because he didn't have the enthusiasm that he used to have. So, what he did was he went to his boss and said, Boss, I'm done. I just can't do this with the enthusiasm that I used to have. And the boss said, Fred, you're my master carpenter. What am I going to do without you? You've helped me build every house that we built for the last 40 years. You know, Fred was taken aback. So the boss said, Look, can you do one more thing for me before you leave? Can you build me just one more house? And Fred said, Of course, boss, I'll do anything. Remember, I've loved this job. It's the only job I've ever had. But his heart wasn't into it any longer. He'd drag his butt to work and he just barely get the job done. But at the end of it, even though he made substandard work, a miracle happened. The house passed inspection. So he went back to his boss and gave the keys to him and said, Bye, boss, I'm done. Boss said, Hold it, Fred. We're going to have a party. So they popped the champagne, they had caviar, they had a great party for him. And at the end, the boss said, everybody gather around. I'm going to give a little speech. He said, everybody, this is Fred's last day. He said, I'm going to be really sad, but Fred's going to be very happy because he's going on to retirement and that's what he wants to do now. And he said, but Fred, before you leave, I have a present for you. He said, here's the keys to the last house you ever built. May you enjoy it with all the enthusiasm that you've given me over the years. Now, the reason I say that is because, enthusiasm's not a Monday thing. It's not a Friday thing. It's not a Thursday thing. It's something you bring to the game every day of your life. And when you do that, that's a game changer. That is truly the biggest game changer that you'll ever have.
Absolutely. I totally agree. That's this book. Something else. Can you speak on empowerment?
Yeah, empowerment is a really interesting thing. And the important thing about empowerment is when you don't have it, you know exactly what it means. When you do have it, it's something that you take for granted. I like the story of empowerment of a person walking down the street and they fall into a hole, and that person climbs out and says, oh, that person was totally unempowered. So the next time he goes down the street, he falls in the hole again. He says, I'm going to make a plan. So he made a plan and he figures out how to get out of it easily. Finally, he figures out that he can walk around that hole, that he doesn't have to fall into it. And even better yet, he figures he can walk on the other side of the street, because the other side of the street, there's no holes. So if he's not paying attention, he's not going to fall in the hole that's there. And that's really what empowerment is all about. It's all about living your life with design and intention so you can go through life in such a way that when life's problems come up, you can overcome those problems and live those problems with those problems without them hurting you or harming you. You're empowered to deal with them. Now, we all know that life is going to throw curveballs at us. We all know that there's going to be things that don't work well. We all know that in a given day, there are things that are going to hurt us and other things that are going to make us thrive. So it's good to be empowered. It's good to know that despite what happens, you're there to meet the task.
Oh boy, this sounds like a pep talk to me. So you have to have a good attitude about this too.
Yes, attitude is important. Attitude is important. Knowing your strengths are important, but also knowing your weaknesses are important.
Absolutely. It's a process of learning and growing, and having some self-love, self-compassion while you do this little dance that we do is life.
Yes, and self-love is where it all starts. In my book, I speak on 7 types of love because the Greek speaks on 7 types of love. And one of the most important is self-love, because without that, none of the other types of love will come forward. None of the other types of love have a chance for growing forward.
Would you like to talk any more about your book? Because I'd like to know what else you're doing too.
Well, my book became a podcast called How to Live a Fantastic Life, which became so popular, it became a radio show. And then, as a result of that, it became a syndicated radio show where we now are on 6 days a week. So we are on a network called AM/FM 24/7. And that is where people can find me 6 days a week. And that is a very simple way. So if you go to an app called Tuned In, and look up AM/FM 24/7 and look for my show, How to Live a Fantastic Life. You'll be able to see and hear me interviewing dozens of interesting guests and finding out how other people perceive how to live a fantastic life so that you can enhance your life as well. Now, in addition, I'm a professional speaker. So if you need a professional speaker, a keynote speaker for your event, please check on me. You can get that at my website, Lycka.com. And you can also check out the other services that I offer there, because I also offer coaching, and coaching is a thing I do on a group basis or an individual basis to help people get to another level. And one thing that people often need is a coach to help guide them. It's not easy to get to where you want to go without having a coach.
Hmm. Interesting. So that's very interesting. Um, do you have any other projects going on right now? Are you writing?
Writing is an all-time thing, and it's something that I always like to do. That, with my book, we had planned it originally as 20 golden pearls, but our audience had said, could you please give us your best pearls first? 20 is going to overwhelm us, they said. So could you please, in your first book, they said, limit it to a number that we can understand and deal with. So Harriet and I pruned it down to 13 golden pearls in the first book. And of course, we've got a second book that's in the works that will cover more golden pearls to help people with their life experience and help them even understand things better and more. So, it is a project. It does take time and effort to get there. It does take us to get to the things that are necessary. And yes, it's going to come, you know, but I want people to get full advantage of the 13 golden pearls before we go and bring more golden pearls into the situation.
Absolutely. I completely understand that, as an author and writer myself. um, I know my book is just too dense. Uh, but you got to bring the humor into it, to break that all up as you're writing.
You know what? And I think one of the greatest things that people can do is they can laugh and be happy and they can be joyful about their life. And I think a good writer also brings those into the situation. It's not just, it's not all seriousness. It's not all about that. It's about the joking and laughing that goes on with that.
And it's also a reflection of life, and especially when you're sharing such emotional stories, your story, the stories that go along with it, in these pearls are, yeah, there's some heavy stuff in there, and for you to break it up with the conversations with Harriet are, um, just beautiful. So thank you for your wonderful
I'm very
contribution.
glad that you enjoyed it, and I'm very glad that you've told others about it, because I think, what this hope is a gift for the 21st century. I think, people have gone through a lot and they need to look at things and get things to another level now. That they need to have some healing that's gone on. The pandemic was traumatic. Life has been fairly traumatic for people. And they're going through traumas in their life, like I and Harriet went through traumas in our lives. So this is where people have to realize that the things we went through are just an example of things people are going through their daily lives right now. Well, ours are dramatic stories, People are going through this in a lesser way themselves right now. They're going through all those phases I went through of anger, denial, bargaining, depression, and they're going through all those phases where they're having problems dealing with the trauma that they sustained through the last couple of years.
Very, very true. Um, being on social media, I read a lot of that, how people are and I try to put myself out there and say, look, it's just, we have to find a way to get through this, together, you know, in a positive way. Take the positive from it. What can we learn from this?
For
Um, I think we're gonna wrap for tonight. If you'd like to share anything else, I'd be happy to
I
have you
think the
share.
key message I'd love everybody to realize, it's not what happens to you, it's what you do with what happens. And that is a message I want you to take home and I want you to think about, because truly, if you realize that and realize that in your heart of hearts, then no obstacle is going to be too great, no mountain too high to climb, that you're going to be able to overcome everything that gets in your way.
I am so honored to have had this discussion with you and have you share your pearls, your golden pearls of wisdom, um, and what you do, and this wonderful book. So thank you so much for being a guest today.
Well, thank you for having me. It really was my pleasure. And I hope people can move forward. If you need any help in that pathway, remember my website is Dr. Allen, Lycka, Lycka.com. I look forward to helping you in any way I can.
Thank you again, and thank you, viewers and listeners, for taking your time and listening to the show today with Dr. Allen Lycka.